Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by husky, hairy, huggable homos who love film to dish up a little bit of movie news and review films, either current or classic. Most weeks we do that. This week is going to be a little bit different. We've got a big show coming to you this week. We're going to be, of course, dishing up some of that movie news, I promise, but also we're going to be talking through some of the bigger categories from the recently announced Academy Award nominations. What got snubbed? What are we happy with? Maybe what are we not happy with? And even to some degree, more importantly, what are you happy with or not happy with? Be sure to jump into that live chat. Let us know your thoughts as we go. We may read some of them on air. Hello to all of you. It looks like we've got several folks who've jumped on already, so welcome. Glad to have you with us. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of our show, let me introduce you to my wonderful, wonderful co-host, Jim Pugliafico. Welcome back to the show. How are you, babe?
I'm doing good, and thanks for welcoming me on the podcast, and welcome to the show, everybody.
That's what I do. Will Indus is here too. Welcome, Will. How are you?
Hello, Brad, Jim, listeners, and anyone with the Academy who might be listening to us weigh in on your Oscar nominations. Please don't be offended. We might have some strong opinions directed your way.
Yeah, like what the fuck did you do?
Oh, indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, hey, before we jump into movie news and the Oscar noms, Will, do you want to know something interesting?
I would like to know something very, very interesting. What have you got, Brad?
So, Will, you remember a couple months ago when you, me, and Chris Lopez, sexy voice of the Movie Bears podcast, all joined forces in one big Steven Universe fusion?
I remember that fusion, Brad. I remember that fusion very, very well.
Well, it's interesting. That episode has become one of our most downloaded episodes of all time. So I think our audience really resonates with that show. So we may have to revisit that topic. And how fitting that Jim has started watching Steven Universe with me, at least some of the highlights. So Jim is starting to get his introduction to the world of SU.
And that's right. I'm getting my curated my curated introduction to Steven Universe.
And how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good.
Good.
You know, it's a sensibility that I have to work at a little bit. You know, kind of that cartoon sensibility. Just because, you know, I just don't digest that much of that stuff, you know, anymore. And but there are some cool things in the show that I think make it unique, and I think those are the things that probably attract you guys to it most. So if I can withstand the cartoony nature of some of the stuff that happens, there's some gems in there to pull out. Pun intended.
Oh, we see what you did there, Jim.
Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah. So is that so that's what we need to do. We need to get Jim, and we need to sit him down and make him watch some episodes of Steven Universe and the Crystal Gems, followed by the Jim and the Holograms movie. Just force feed gems to Jim while making him eat Slim Jims.
All while the Gem Show is happening here in Tucson for the next couple of weeks.
That's right.
See, I feel like we've not designed a great day for you, all things considered, Jim. I feel like that maybe didn't go over as well as it could have. But
well, you know, I'm partway there. I saw the Gem and the Holograms movie. So right, the new Gems movie.
Yeah,
and we watched the pilot of the Gem cartoon. So you've got that too, Jim.
Right. So yeah, I'm partway there. So maybe by the time, if you guys do another Steven Universe revisit show to catch up or whatever, maybe I'll join you if I'm feeling confident enough.
I have a feeling we're going to have to. We've come. The storyline has progressed since last we did our catch up. There's been some new interesting things happening that I would love to talk with you guys about. So yeah, that should probably be on our agenda at some undisclosed time in the future.
We'll definitely put it on our agenda.
You're really reaching tonight.
Oh goodness!
If it's there, take it. But if it's not there, don't.
Brad's got his Mr. Fantastic moves going on tonight.
I'm like, ooh. All right. Well, we may have to revisit that topic here in a while, but I was just interested. I logged in and I was looking at stuff and I'm like, wait a second. What? How does that like have so many listens? And then I realized it was Steven Universe and I was like, oh, right.
And not only that, like if you think about like our movie episodes, you'll probably see, you know, any random movie. It's probably going to be most popular to listen to in and around the time the movie's in theaters, maybe in and around the time that movie is out on Blu-ray, and maybe if it gets a sequel or a nomination. But there's some movies like they'll just disappear into the annals of time. Think about like I, Frankenstein. You know, there's probably not someone who's just like, oh man, can't wait to listen to that one. But Steven Universe is such a perennial topic, right? Like you can watch the new episodes that have come out and go like, oh, let me go look online. Oh, these guys talked about it. Let's hear what they had to say.
Indeed. Well, we'll see about putting that together, but our business for this week is all about the Oscar nominations and some recent movie news that has popped up. So guys, how are we feeling? Are we ready to dive in to that movie news and get this train rolling?
Feeling good.
Yeah, it's been a while since we covered movie news. Let's do it.
All right. Well, then here we go. Some movie news. All right. So this is that part of the show where we talk to you guys, our wonderful listeners who we love and adore, about things that have kind of caught our interest in the film industry lately. Jim, why don't you go ahead and kick us off this week? What have you got?
Well, one of the movies we've talked about on the show and we reviewed in depth on the last episode, the most recent episode, was Call Me By Your Name by director, oh God, what's his first name? I'm already forgetting. That's right, Luca Guadagnino. And come to find out, there's already talk about a sequel. I mean, we all love the movie. It's gotten a lot of attention. There's some Oscar attention to this movie as well, which we may talk about later. But there's talk about a sequel coming along, and in terms of like relationship movies and sequels, we think of things like the Before trilogy, movies like that where they kind of revisit these relationships through time. And it sounds like from what Luca is talking about, that the Call Me By Your Name sequel, which doesn't really have a name, it's not, there's no release date or anything yet. It'll be quite a while, but he's talking about moving the story forward probably 3 years. So by moving it forward 3 years, he brings it into around the 1990 timeframe, kind of like the fall of communism timeframe. Oliver and Elio have obviously aged 3 years. It will allow, for instance, in the case of the actors like Timothy, who will be 20, he's 17 in the movie. And he will be he's going to change the time to like 1990. And the movie was set in, no, I'm sorry. The movie's going to be set in 1990. So it's a 7-year jump, but it's going to be a 3-year jump in age for the actors. So some exciting stuff coming up in this movie. He doesn't really give any spoilers or anything away. He just says he's going to jump so that Timothy will be playing a character instead of like he was in this movie, a 22-year-old playing a 17-year-old. He'll be like a 25-year-old playing a 25-year-old. So, basically he will grow into his age. So that will be a little bit interesting and a little less distracting, I guess you could say. But yeah, I don't know. Are you excited for that, Brad? I know you really loved Call Me By Your Name.
Yeah, I'm definitely really excited. We talked a little bit last week about how I'm reading the book. And I'm about, I don't know, I guess a third of the way through the book right now, and it's proceeding pretty quickly through the content in the movie. So I was kind of like, where's this going? Because like I feel like we're already halfway through the movie, but only, you know, a third of the way through the book. So my understanding, because I was doing a little bit of research about this, is that there's 40 pages in the novel that continue the story over 20 years after the events of the first movie. In fact, I was reading a little bit. The director wants to turn this into a film series, a lot like the Before Sunset trilogy from Richard Linklater. And I'm really excited by that idea. I would love to see sort of what happens to these characters. I don't know if we want to go, you know, 6 or 9 years or whatever in real life between movies that sort of mirror that format. But I mean, I could definitely see at least a sequel, if not maybe a third movie, depending on how things go. My only fear is like too much of a good thing, right? The first movie was such a man, it was kind of like this ethereal, bright thing. And I think if we just start hyper loading, that maybe causes it to lose some of its power. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm excited. Will, how about you?
Both excited and not excited at the same time, if that's fair. And for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. I mean, this director and these actors are teaming up to explore this world and these characters even further. Yeah, I'm all for that. There's a lot of things to really like there. But at the same time, there was a closure and a finality to this particular film where I feel like it probably ended on the perfect note after the perfect climax and the perfect, I don't know, just adventure. And so with that already having been perfected, I almost feel like the bar it's set for itself is so high that it almost has no choice but to be a shadow of itself when it comes sequel time. And I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if I'm ready to come back into this and say, well, it was fun seeing them again, but it just wasn't as much fun as the first time. Maybe that won't be the case. Maybe they'll knock it out of the park, but I'm excited, but I'm also incredibly hesitant.
Yeah. I mean, with any of these things, it's tough to get our hopes up, you know, really high and kind of go in maybe over expecting. That's never a good thing. So yeah, cautious optimism maybe in this one. But Brad, to your point, like he mentioned that, you know, and I'm not reading the book and you are, and you're not that far, but I guess the book does cover quite a bit of time. And I don't think though that it, obviously this movie, the sequel will give it maybe a little bit more attention to certain parts later in the book that you haven't got to, that maybe the book might, you know, cover at a superficial level. Maybe this will allow it to go in a little deeper detail.
I just hope there's enough time for Sufjan Stevens to like build up more of his song catalog for the next movie.
I did read something where he's already talked about wanting to partner with Sufjan for more songs on the next soundtrack. So yeah. Wish granted.
All right. Well, cautious optimism, I think, is the thing here. So I guess we'll see what happens. Will, what have you got this week?
Yeah. So it was just announced today that Tom Hanks is set to star in a new biopic coming out. Gosh, it's still early on, so this was probably going to be like 2019 before we actually see this. But it's a biopic about Mr. Rogers. The film is going to be called You Are My Friend, and it's going to be directed by Marielle Heller, who you might remember as she's the person who directed Diary of a Teenage Girl a couple years ago. This is exciting news because I think a lot of us owe some portion of our childhood to Mr. Rogers. And I think a lot of us also kind of, again, if we're talking things going on in the world, sort of long for a more Mr. Rogers world where like kindness and all of that is a virtue and not a rarity. Also pretty interesting that this is announced right on the heels of Sundance, where at the Sundance Film Festival, a documentary called Won't You Be My Neighbor actually did very, very well about Mr. Rogers as well. So looks like we're going to get a documentary about Mr. Rogers this year and a Tom Hanks starred film either end of this year or sometime next year. And I'm all for it. I'm excited for this one. But how about you guys?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Mr. Rogers was a big part of me growing up, you know, on PBS channels. It's actually more a part of my life than something like Sesame Street was growing up. I loved watching Mr. Rogers, and I even like watching it sometimes now, you know, in reruns, and you can find them everywhere. You can find them on YouTube, for crying out loud. But yeah, I'm interested in the man. So I'm definitely interested in seeing the documentary that just, as you said, Will, premiered at Sundance this last week. Won't You Be My Neighbor? It sounds great, you know, and I love the documentary, you know, the sensibilities, and I think it would be great to watch this one. Although, I don't know, a live action with Tom Hanks has me a little bit cautious. Will I be able to see Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers, or Tom Hanks playing Fred Rogers? That will be the issue for me. If he can bring the character to life, and I see through Tom Hanks to get to Fred Rogers, it could be really good. So that's going to be the key for me.
I just want Vin Diesel to play Trolley. Is that too much to ask?
You know what? I'm here for that too. Like, let's make that happen. In fact, let's get the entire Fast Furious franchise, like that group of actors, to play all of the different support characters in this movie. Why can't we have that happen? Why can't Ludacris, you know, be a special guest star? Like, why can't we make all of this happen? What's interesting about this film is that it looks like it's going to be one of those types of stories that's less of a like womb to tomb style biopic and more about like a particular era of Fred Rogers' life. The description that I'm seeing here from Variety is that it's inspired by the real life friendship between Fred Rogers and award-winning journalist Tom Junod. In the story, a cynical journalist begrudgingly accepts an assignment to write a profile piece on the beloved icon and finds his perspective on life transformed. So I kind of like the idea of looking at a character through the lens of a character that knew him, or an actor, you know, someone that knew him. I think that that's so much more interesting to me than just he was born, right, he had a childhood, he did these things, and then sad music plays as he dies, like which we've seen a billion times in these movies.
Yeah, I mean that does sound like an interesting angle. And did they say that this? You said maybe the end of this year, Will?
I don't see a date on it, so I'm really just assuming like if it's just now in the early stages. I mean, The Post, they whipped that sucker out in no time to get it out by the end of 2017. So I wouldn't be surprised if it makes this year, but I would probably be looking for this to be like more of a 2019 film. That's my guess, though. I don't know for sure.
Did they assign a director yet? Did I hear anything?
Yeah, the director is Marielle Heller, the director of Diary of a Teenage Girl.
Huh. Okay, that's one I still have yet to catch up with, so I'm not really familiar with her work yet. So
she's also done, like, she's mostly done. I mean, she's honestly mostly done that. And a little bit of TV, like an episode of Transparent, a couple episodes of something called Casual. And then that's been it. So for Diary of a Teenage Girl to do relatively well, being her first feature to direct, and then for her second to be a Tom Hanks movie, good on her, right?
Yeah. I mean, sounds like she's been working on some pretty edgy kind of stuff. I heard Diary of a Teenage Girl was pretty had some pretty edgy stuff in it. So if they could bring an edge to Mr. Rogers, can you imagine how cool that would be?
We'll see. Not too much edge, right? Like,
no, but enough to make him seem like really human. You know what I mean? Not too
Mr.
godlike.
Mr. Rogers was pretty straight edged, you guys. So plenty of edginess.
Right.
They're available. Well, we will see. Hey, want to give a quick shout out to some of our wonderful folks hanging out with us in the live chat today. Steve Sosa is with us. He says, first Tom Hanks was Walt Disney. Now he's Mr. Rogers. Steve is 100% on board with that. And Ben Stark, who just moved to Arizona recently. Ben, I know you and I have been chatting a little bit. Jim, I think when we go up to Phoenix in a few weeks, maybe we can grab coffee or dinner or something with Ben and give him some Arizona welcoming energy from us.
That would be awesome. I look forward to doing that. Yeah.
Definitely. So, Ben, we can't wait to meet you in person now that you're in range of doing so. But glad to have you guys with us. For those of you who are hanging out, but you haven't said hello in the live chat yet, feel free to avail yourself of that tool. We'd love to hear from you guys, especially as we jump into the Oscar noms here in just a little bit. But for me this week, movie news, we're getting a sequel to a movie I never thought we'd get a sequel to, guys. A movie that is so wonderful, so perfect to me in its original inception that I was kind of on the fence, like, do I want a sequel or not? That movie, of course, is The Shining. Stephen King a few years back did write a sequel to The Shining called Dr. Sleep, and that film that book is now being turned into a film directed by Mike Flanagan, who directed Gerald's Game, which we all really, really liked. I know Stephen King wasn't a super big fan of Kubrick's film adaptation. That's definitely no secret. Hoping, since he was a fan of Flanagan's take on Gerald's Game, that means this new film, maybe they're going to have a stronger working relationship. Maybe it'll be a little more faithful. I don't know. What do you guys think about a sequel to The Shining? Is that something you're looking forward to or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've got to look at this as a sequel to The Shining, the book, and not a sequel to The Shining, the movie. And that's because Kubrick's adaptation, which I agree is one of the best adaptations ever put to film. I would also go as far as to say it's also one of the best films I've ever seen. That was such a departure from the source material that, like you mentioned, Stephen King himself had some issues with the how faithful it is. So I almost see that as existing in its own little time capsule, its own little bubble. This sequel, the Dr. Sleep book, is a good little sequel to a good little book. It's a fun read about an adult version of, Danny Torrance is now an adult and he's an alcoholic and he's wandering around doing some of the stuff that he, you would expect someone with his power set to do. And Mike Flanagan, I think, is the perfect guy to do this particular material. So if you go into this thinking like this is a sequel to The Shining, the movie, you're going to be disappointed because Flanagan, I think, is going to be much more faithful to the source material here, which means it's going to be two very, very, very different films. But again, this is the guy who gave us things like Oculus, who gave us Gerald's Game. He gave us Before I Wake, which kind of came out this year. And one of the things that he does so good as a filmmaker, as when he does his horror, it's not just horror. There's a lot of character building. He lets his characters have moments to sort of just exist in the world they're in. If there's a moment where there needs to be like some light or some kindness, he allows that before letting some darkness happen as well. And that's very fitting with the way Stephen King writes his books. They, especially his more recent books, aren't just packed with scares. They're usually much more about this like battle between light and darkness that exists in this world, as opposed to just overbearing darkness. I think Flanagan's perfect for this. So yeah, I'm very much on board for this, with the asterisks of I'm keeping Kubrick's Shining in a bubble and not letting that bleed into my expectations here.
Bubble it will and send it back to the temple.
That was a good reference.
And I even understood that reference now.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, Will, I agree. I think obviously Kubrick's The Shining is, I think, one of the best movies of all time. even if Stephen King didn't like it, even if it wasn't very, quote, faithful to the book, I think basically he used the book as a framework to hang a very, a lot of Kubrickisms put into that movie to make it kind of its own thing, give it its own atmosphere, which I loved. I never read the book The Shining, and I probably won't read Dr. Sleep before seeing the new movie. But I have liked a lot of what Mike Flanagan has done, the director who's going to do this sequel. Hush was a really great movie. I love that movie. And this being not really, it's a sequel, but it's really just kind of an update or continuation of Danny Torrance's story, it sounds like, where he has this gift, The Shining, and he's kind of fallen on hard times. He's alcoholic, and he starts to, I think what I read is that as he tries to dry out, he starts to get the shining back again. And this is what the story is kind of going to be based on. So I could see this being very well done, man, but Flanagan's got a lot to live up to, because even if you could say till you blue in the face, this is not going to be a sequel to the movie. People are going to see this as that it's going to be marketed as a sequel to the movie.
Yep.
And unless it's handled correctly, you don't want the audiences set up for disappointment when it really doesn't have any of that flavor. That's kind of what I worry about with this movie, how they're going to position it.
Well, I guess we have some time for them to work it out. But we'll see what happens, I suppose. Mm-hmm. If we had The Shining, maybe we'd know already, but alas, no future vision, no psychic powers for us. But I'm kind of okay with that, because if I were seeing ghosts and random crap everywhere, that would probably not be a good thing. Hey, we've got Ben A with us as well in the live chat. Hey, Ben, we now have two Bens. Maybe one is Prime Ben and one is Mirror Universe Ben. I don't know.
No. We've got Ben Stark and Ben A. I'm going to say Ben A is Ben America, Stark America, Civil War. We're going to have a battle in the chat.
There we go. Sometimes battles do take place. Bobby Miller's hopping on with us as well. Bobby, so good to see you. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. Well, guys, I think that about wraps us up for movie news. Are you guys ready to talk about these Oscar noms?
Very much so, actually.
Yeah. There's quite a bit to talk about.
All right. Well, then we are going to get to it. We are not reviewing a feature film this week, which is a rarity on the Movie Bears podcast, but there is so much to talk about with these recently announced Academy Award nominations. So we're going to dive right in. Here we go. Oscar nominations. All right, so we picked some of the more major categories that we want to talk through, but sort of at the end of the discussion, we're going to have sort of an open roundtable place for any of the categories that we didn't bring up yet. So for those of you who are listening live, feel free to chime in on each category as we go. We'd love to know your thoughts. Were you happy with the noms? Were you pissed off that your favorite actor or film got snubbed? And when we get to that roundtable at the end, let's just make it a feeding frenzy free for all. Feel free. That was a lot of F words in one sentence. None of them ended in uck. So, okay. But let's go ahead and get right to it. We're going to start with the lead actor category. And we'll just kind of run through the nominees and open it up, guys. We can talk through wherever you guys want to start. But for lead actor, we had Timothée Chalamet from Call Me By Your Name, who we were just talking about moments ago. Daniel Day-Lewis, and perhaps his last film. Word is he's retiring. That, of course, is Phantom Thread. Daniel from Get Out, Darkest Hour, and Denzel Washington from Roman J. Israel Esquire. So, guys, what do you think of this this list of nominees here? Are you pretty happy with this?
I'm going to let Will speak. I feel like I'm at a little disadvantage here. I saw I think like 250 something movies this year, and there's still 3 on here that I have not seen. I have not seen Phantom Thread, Darkest Hour, or Roman J. Israel Esquire. So it's hard for me really to like say how I feel about this actor in a leading role. I actually think, and you guys may totally and vehemently disagree with me, but I think this is probably one of the weaker categories of the batch of categories for this year. Typically, you have some really, really really strong male leads in the year, and this year, I mean, there are some, but nothing that maybe jumps out at you and kind of grabs you by the throat. There's some surprise, some really good performances in here, but at least the two that I saw. But I don't know. Will, what do you think?
So on the whole, I think the Oscars had a tough time to begin with this year because we mentioned during our top 10 list that this was a very, very, very competitive year. And in a lot of the categories, there was a lot of cluster to get in. And there were some good picks that got snubbed, not for any other reason other than there were just not enough spots. I would say that this is not one of those categories, though, because I think there were sort of 4 safe picks and then one and 2 people that were fighting for the last pick. Those safe picks were Chalamet, Daniel Kaluuya, and Daniel Day-Lewis. Of course, with Gary Oldman, this is one of the safest locks, I think, in terms of like who's going to end up winning with what he did with Darkest Hour. But the ones that were on the fence were Roman J. Israel and James Franco for gosh, what was the name of his movie? Disaster Artist. And I think there's going to be a lot of buzz about maybe him getting snubbed because of his the sexual abuse allegations that are happening. I think he ended up getting snubbed because this is the Oscars and that's not the type of performance. A lot of the stuff that happened with him came out after a lot of those votes had already been locked in. So I don't think that impacted things. Plus, Denzel is usually pretty safe to make it into the Oscars. But yeah, look for this category to be Gary Oldman pretty handily walking away with it. Maybe Daniel Day-Lewis on the outside edge, but this is one of the safer categories. And as we're going to see as we get to it, I don't think there's a ton of super safe categories.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just looking in the live chat, Sammy from Denver is with us. Hey, Sammy, glad to have you with us. But Ben A says Daniel Day-Lewis is a bit overrated. I haven't seen Phantom Thread yet, so I personally can't speak to that. But I remember people losing their shit over his performance in Lincoln, and I was not like a super huge fan of that performance. So, for me, maybe he was really great in Phantom Thread. I don't know, but it is cool to see him nominated, especially if this might be his final film to go out on such a high note, even if he doesn't win. I think is pretty cool. So we'll have to see what happens. Given the buzz, I wouldn't be surprised if Gary Oldman takes it. Again, haven't seen Darkest Hour yet. But man, everyone's going gaga saying he's like the golden thread of that film. So we'll see.
Yeah, he's amazing in it. If I could give my own statue, I would give Daniel Day-Lewis for Phantom Thread just because Gary Oldman relies a little bit on like makeup. I think some people conflate acting with makeup sometimes. We see that with these categories. Like, her acting was so good, her nose looked different. It's like, well, that's the makeup artist. He was still really good in this, but Daniel Day-Lewis did a lot with a very understated performance here, and so it was a hell of a performance to go out on.
Yeah, well, I agree. And when I meant weakest category, I probably meant safe. Like, there's nothing that really grabs you. I'm super thrilled to see like a movie, a performance like Daniel Kaluuya's in Get Out be nominated in this category. I think that's probably the biggest surprise in this category. Maybe I know that movie got a lot of attention this year, a lot of buzz because it's kind of a genre busting. It busts a lot of preconceptions that we have about horror movies, and his performance was really good. So I think that's a surprise. That probably the only. To me, that's that, and maybe Timothée Chalamet's as the second surprise. Still a great performance. I just didn't know if it would get enough love to be nominated. But the other ones, yeah, you're right, are really safe. Daniel Day-Lewis and Denzel Washington and Gary Oldman, those are the kind of actors where if they get a lead role anywhere from October through December, like you might as well just throw their name on the list because they're going to be on that list. those guys don't give bad performances. And I think the Academy gets a little complacent in, like, I don't know, kind of giving them the handicapping the race a little bit. But hey, I haven't seen Phantom Thread nor Darkest Hour. Wanted to see that. I really did want to see Roman J. Israel. I heard kind of really sketchy things about the movie. So
it's streaming in like 2 weeks. Like, that one's almost out. But no Tom Hanks here either, which is at least like, it looks like we got some younger blood in his place. And so that's good.
Yeah.
What do you want to do, Mrs. Graham? Anyway, didn't make the cut. Hey, all right. Well, a couple quick things just from the chat. Ben Stark says he loves that there was a nomination for Get Out. And I mean, definitely interesting to see that as well. I really love that movie, but I'm surprised, A, given how early it came out last year, and B, just the environment of Hollywood these days. Kind of surprised to see this, but I love to see it, and I hope we see a lot fucking more of it as the years progress and as more of these amazing films come out. Guys, we do have a lot of categories to talk through, though, so we're going to go ahead and move along to lead actress. And nominations are Sally Hawkins from The Shape of Water. We were just talking about Sally in our Paddington 2 review last week. Good to see her show up there. Frances McDormand, of course, from Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Margot Robbie and I, Tonya. And Will, how do you pronounce her name?
Saoirse Ronan.
There you go. And then Meryl Streep, of course, from The Post. I had Will pronounce it. We were having a fun little discussion before we went live today.
Saoirse.
It's so funny, like, when she was nominated for Brooklyn a few years back, like I must have heard like 50 different pronunciations of her name, and we probably used like 5 of them, guys, when we reviewed Brooklyn. So it's good to see her getting some recognition here. But what do you guys think about these nominees? Is there anybody missing that you thought you were going to see, or is this pretty much what you expect?
Pretty much what I expected. I think for me, this is tied probably with the strongest category this year. All of these performances were great. This is one where I actually saw all of them, so I can say that. We love Saoirse Ronan in Brooklyn. I wasn't the hugest fan of Lady Bird, but her performance was solid. Meryl Streep, it's another one, just like I talked in the last category. If she's got a lead role in a movie from October to December, just throw her name right on the list because it's automatic. On this case, though, I don't believe it's an automatic win. I think pretty much every performance above hers, to me, was stronger than hers this year. So I think actually Meryl Streep was probably the underdog in this category, if you ask me. But I loved pretty much all of the 4 other nominees in this category. I thought they were all great performances. It's a real horse race to see who's going to win this. Shape of Water is getting all kinds of love with 13 total nominations. I love everything that Sally Hawkins is in. Frances McDormand is probably, if I was going to put money on somebody, that's probably who I would put it on in this category. I, Tonya, that movie's been up and down reviews-wise. I kind of loved it. I thought her performance was great. I think some of the political crap around that movie kind of dragged it down a little bit, unfortunately, because I thought her performance and another performance we're going to talk about later was super strong. And, of course, Saoirse Ronan, who, I mean, she's going to be a name you're going to hear from a lot in the next several years. So, yeah, I'm happy, but I think it's going to be Frances here.
Yeah, if I was drafting up on paper who I thought the 5 nominees were going to be, I would have guessed exactly these 5. I don't think there's any like real surprises here. And I can't quibble with them. I mean, I might want to say Kristen Stewart from Personal Shopper or Florence Pugh from Lady Macbeth could be in there instead of Meryl Streep, but I get it. I think you're absolutely right. This is going to be Frances McDormand's category to lose. I think she is the front runner here. And if I put a spoiler on anyone, I would say maybe it's on Saoirse Ronan for Lady Bird. If anyone takes it from McDormand, I think that's where it's going to go. But I'm right there with you, Jim. And when it's betting time, it's going to be McDormand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely think that's how we're going to see this play out. Although Lady Bird has gotten, I mean, just so much praise, and so I mean, she definitely did a really great job in that film. But you know, for me, looking at the two performances side by side, it's, I think, really hard to knock Frances McDormand out of that contention for me. So I think that's going to be the way it goes. Just kind of catching up with the live chat a little bit. Steve says, no Gal Gadot. Makes me wonder. As much as I loved Wonder Woman, and I know we were a big fan of that movie overall, do you think she should have got some Oscar love, guys, or do you think maybe not so much?
Who would you knock out? Like that's where I think about when I think about snubs. I always think about, okay, well, if someone got snubbed, then who would I replace her with? And when I look at this list, I don't see anyone here whose performance was worse than Gal Gadot's. I think Gal Gadot is a perfectly fine Wonder Woman, but I think the strength of that movie had to do a lot more with direction, and it had to do a lot more with some of the visual effects than it had to do with necessarily her performance. Although she held her own, don't get me wrong. It's not a bad performance.
Yeah, I think she holds her own, and I think a lot of, and this, I don't want to take any credit away from her, but I think the character that they created in that movie for Wonder Woman, and certainly Gal Gadot is part of that, is so charismatic that it's hard not to pay attention to that character. I mean, that's, to me, that's a perfect marriage of acting and character, especially for a superhero movie. Unfortunately, I think superhero movies probably get the short shaft when it comes to, like, you know, best picture and, you know, actor and actress nominations. And that's too bad. But I love Gal Gadot's performance. And, you know, probably she's, if I was ranking these, she'd be somewhere around 6th or 7th to this list, maybe.
Yeah, I think she is the perfect you know, also ran for this category. And that's not a bad place to be. In a year with, you know, Sally Hawkins, Frances McDormand, Margot Robbie, Meryl Streep, and then Saoirse Ronan, who has been kind of a good, strong, like, kind of out of nowhere up-and-comer. To say that Gal Gadot is right outside of that list is not a knock on her talents at all.
Nope, not at all. All right, well, guys, how do we feel about moving on to supporting actor?
Do it.
All right. So nominees for supporting actor are William Dafoe from The Florida Project, Woody Harrelson from 3 Billboards, Richard Jenkins from The Shape of Water. Very glad to see that. Christopher Plummer, All the Money in the World, and then Sam Rockwell, also from 3 Billboards. Funny that 3 Billboards keep showing up in these nominations. Any surprises here?
Yeah, I think there's one really, really big surprise. And I usually am much lighter on snub talk because, again, the same reason I just said before, you know. But I feel as though Christopher Plummer's inclusion here for All the Money in the World, it's a very fine supporting role, but I think more than anything here, he was nominated because of the gimmick of, he was the guy that they took Kevin Spacey out and then digitally put Christopher Plummer in post to play this role. And it's a good role. It's a good performance. He does a good enough job with it, but it's not a great movie. What's missing here is Michael Stuhlbarg from Call Me by Your Name. He would have been my hands down choice to be nominated, and probably my 1 or 2 that I thought were most likely to win. So for him to not make it at all was the biggest of all of the surprises when the nominations were announced. I would also say that, you know, give me Patrick Stewart for Logan, or give me Armie Hammer for Call Me by Your Name as other potential also rans here. The rest of the list looks good. I think Sam Rockwell is going to win this one. I don't think that's going to be too terribly surprising, just given kind of what happened with Golden Globes and the trajectory of 3 Billboards. I don't think 3 Billboards is going to win a whole lot of things, but I think it's going to take these 2 acting performances. Willem Dafoe is almost in a career best there in The Florida Project. Woody Harrelson was solid, and Richard Jenkins holds his own in Shape of Water. So a great category all around, except for that one glaring omission, Michael Stuhlbarg. But my money here is on Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, well, it's hard for me to separate, especially in this category for some reason, to separate acting performance from character. You know, how much the character resonated with me, either in a positive light or negative light. In the case of Sam Rockwell, for instance, right? He's not a likable character, yet you recognize the performance that he puts into that character. And yeah, he may be the front runner. My very close dark horse, though, would be Willem Dafoe in the Florida Project. I think that you know, he doesn't get as much to chew on as and probably any of these other characters, to be honest with you, these other performances. But I just think his performance was so, so endearing and honest and true, that he elevated that movie more, I think, than any of the other actors in this category. So I don't know. I might put my money on Willem Dafoe as kind of a take a risk kind of choice in this category.
There's a difference sometimes between voting with your heart and voting with your mind, and those are two they're both very fine things to do. I would say if I could pick, I would pick Willem Dafoe. I don't think he's going to end up taking it.
You just said that because his name is almost like yours.
It's very, very close to mine, and plus Green Goblin love, right? No, he would absolutely be like he would be my pick. I think he is. I think what he did in that film was something very, very, very special. I think the fact that the Florida Project was so overlooked in some other categories probably speaks to this movie having not been seen by enough voters. And that's part of it. You know, the voters are all marketed to, just like we're marketed to. And some of these films, that's why Good Time, I think, didn't show up a lot, because people, like voters, just didn't see it to the same degree. So I think that's going to hurt him. And that's a shame, because I do think it was the best supporting performance of the year.
You know, it's interesting. Steve in the chat says maybe instead of Woody Harrelson, because we have 2 noms from 3 Billboards, maybe we should have seen Ray Romano from The Big Sick. Jim, I know you were a big fan of that one. What do you think about that? Do you think he was deserving here?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think the thing with Ray Romano is we look at that performance in light of his other work, right? His other work being, Everybody Loves Raymond, mostly, I think, is what we think of. And that's a super standout performance in The Big Sick. Probably a movie that didn't get enough love either this year. But I don't know if the performance in that movie was enough to kind of make a statement like these other actors did. For Ray Romano, yeah, it's a big statement. It's a step, and it was really fun to watch, and I really loved his character in that performance. Even Holly Hunter, I mean, in that movie, both of them I thought were fantastic. So you could make a case for her, but then who are you going to knock out of that supporting actress category? So. Yeah, again, I think this is one that could be a close to being nominated, but and maybe was considered by some, but just didn't make it.
And that's the way it happens sometimes. There's only so much room on that kind of list, right? And again, it doesn't negate the great performance, but in a year of really phenomenal performances, you know what I mean? Like the line has to be drawn somewhere, I guess. So sorry, Ray Romano. Guys, supporting actress. Let's go ahead and move forward and talk about these nominees. So we have Mary J. Blige from Mudbound, Allison Janney from I, Tonya, who I adore, Leslie Manville from Phantom Thread, Laurie Metcalf of Roseanne fame from Lady Bird, and Octavia Spencer from The Shape of Water. Where do you guys want to start here?
This is sort of a 2-horse race, right? Like between Allison Janney and Laurie Metcalf. End of the day, Allison Janney's probably got this one locked up, even though Laurie Metcalf, who is sort of the kind of the second place to her, would be my easy pick of the year. Like that, Laurie Metcalf gave. Just looking over the list, if probably Laurie Metcalf and Michael Stuhlbarg were my 2 favorite performances on screen this year. Just what they did with the amount of time that they had on screen was remarkable. We have some other really good ones here. I love seeing Mary J. Blige here for Mudbound. She again, that's a film that not enough people saw. It's on Netflix, so anyone can go watch it right now, and they absolutely should, because it's great filmmaking. Leslie Manville holds her own against Daniel Day-Lewis, which is always a mark of something good. And Octavia Spencer was absolutely delightful in The Shape of Water. I was looking for snubs in this category, and I think this is the one where my snubs are more of a stretch than just about anywhere else. These are probably the right 5. Maybe there's a conversation for Holly Hunter for The Big Sick. Maybe there's even you know, I don't think the film was as well received, but give me Tiffany Haddish from Girls Trip, because for the film being decent but not great, I think she absolutely stole the show every time she was on screen. But it's a road trip comedy, and those tend to not really make it into these categories. So yeah, loved Laurie Metcalf, but look for Allison Janney to take home a statue. And no problems there.
No, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I didn't get to see Phantom Thread, like I said, so I can't speak to Leslie Manville's how she stacks up against these categories. I did get to see Mudbound. Brad, I don't think you got to see it with me. I think I watched it on one of my trips or something like that. And Mary J. There were a lot of great performances in that movie. I'm not sure hers was one I would have called out. I think there were a couple of others in that movie that could have gotten attention too, in some of the male categories, for instance. But you know, Octavia Spencer is doing the Octavia Spencer thing in this movie. There's not really much nuance to that character. You see what you get. You know what you're getting with her. I'm waiting for that role where she really like gives us something that like knocks my socks off, because I think she's got it, and I think it's just picking the right role. Brad, were you going to say something?
I was going to piggyback on that a little bit, because I loved Octavia Spencer in The Shape of Water. I think she was great, but you make a really great point. We pretty much got the same character in The Shape of Water as we did in the last several movies that she's been in, right? What was the name of the NASA movie that she was in? How am I forgetting that name?
Oh, in Hidden Figures?
Hidden Figures. Yeah, Hidden Figures. You know, she was great in that too, but you know, she essentially played the same person just with a different job, right? She was great in The Help, but again, same person, different time period, different job. I would love to see Octavia Spencer really stretch herself and do something different and sort of break out of that mold. And when I think about Allison Janney here, like I loved her on The West Wing. She's done some fun stuff, you know, on TV. She's had some great movie roles previously, but what a transformation that was for her in I, Tonya, right? Like, I mean, not just from her look, but also just her mannerisms. Like she channels this like alcoholic, semi-abusive mom so well. And she's funny without trying to be funny, I guess. Like it feels like the character is just like darkly funny, not a performance. And I think for me, that's what takes it from being just like, oh, she did good in a role, to she embodied that character so much that I forgot it's an actress playing a character. And for me, that's why you should get a statue. So I fully support that.
Yeah, and I think in Lady Bird, I think Laurie Metcalf, so here's the way I look at the 2-horse race. Laurie Metcalf, I think, gave us a more broad performance. I think her range of, the range that she had to portray for that mother character was a lot wider than what Allison Janney was. Pretty one note in this movie. It was, she was pretty one tone. Now that was pretty spot,
she had to play more of a caricature, which
which
is not a bad thing. Like it's
no, like, but if you look at if you watch the movie and there's a clip at the end, minor spoilers, where they actually show them. You're watching this movie and you're like, there's no fucking way this woman was like this. Come on, and then they show a clip of the actual mom being interviewed, and it's like, oh my god, I think showing that clip alone may have won her the statue, because otherwise you'd say, oh, that was way too over the top. She's just like caricaturing it. But yeah, it's going to be a great race. You could write either name down and still maybe have a good chance.
Brad, you mentioned Octavia Spencer. What I would love to see her do more of is genre work, actually, because if I were to pick my 2 favorite Octavia Spencer performances, I would probably go with what she did in Snowpiercer and what she did in Small Town Crime, which we saw at South by Southwest this last year. I want to see her in more films like that. And I think Shape of Water is also genre, and that fits in that category. I do like what she did here. But I will say that, yeah, her performance is, I don't know, there's a little bit less to it than the other four in this category.
It's so funny. Like, as we're talking about this reminds me so much of delivering annual performance reviews at work. Like, so Octavia Spencer, you achieved expectations here, and you came in at a very high level of achieving expectations. But for the next year, I'd like to see you really grow and stretch yourself. Here's some things that you could maybe work on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and keep this Oscar nom bus moving on down the line and move on to Best Director. So we've got Christopher Nolan for Dunkirk. We've got Jordan Peele for Get Out, which I'm very happy to see here. Greta Gerwig, of course, for Lady Bird. Paul Thomas Anderson for Phantom Thread, and Guillermo del Toro for The Shape of Water. Any significant snubs here, or is this pretty much what you thought we'd see?
Will, go ahead. I don't know about snubs in this category. I would have liked to have seen Tangerine get something here. Sean Baker, what he did in that movie, I thought was fantastic. The performances he gets out of children, out of people who've never acted before. I mean, just the way he treated that story, I think was fantastic. And to me, that maybe is the biggest snub.
Yeah. And it's hard because this one here, you know, I said with the lead actress, you know, I could have written those exact 5 down. I couldn't have written exactly these 5 down because I think the short list for director was 10 names deep. The 5 that we had listed here, I think Martin McDonagh for 3 Billboards, Steven Spielberg for The Post, Sean Baker, of course, for The Florida Project, Luca Guadagnino for Call Me By Your Name, and Patty Jenkins for Wonder Woman. Those 10 names were all ones. Those 5 plus the 5 that made it. I was expecting any combination of those 10. With, again, I think this is Guillermo del Toro's year to win the statue. I think all of the momentum is behind him. I think he's going to get Best Director for Shape of Water. I would be happy with anyone in this category winning, honestly. I think what Jordan Peele and Greta Gerwig did this year was they showed us, they were able to give us strong direction that wasn't big direction. You know, I think that's some of what you get with like a Guillermo del Toro or a Christopher Nolan or a Spielberg. You get big direction, and that's usually what gets recognized, like big, bold moments. But I think with Jordan Peele, you got to see social commentary woven in a very witty way through a film, and you don't see that nominated very often. And Greta Gerwig gave us very great character building moments all through it. Like, and that's the same thing that we got with Sean Baker. You know, they had very similar direction styles. So I love this field. I probably would have loved any other combination of this field as well. Guillermo del Toro to win. My personal pick on this one would be my girl Greta Gerwig, but I can't hate any of these 5 winners.
Yeah, I mean, Will, I think you're right. I think I'm slightly leaning toward Guillermo del Toro. My close second, of course, is Christopher Nolan for what he did with Dunkirk. That film is amazing, and you know, his direction and what he was able to do on that, put on that screen in terms of the warfare and stuff was great. The rest, I think, are kind of they're in there and they're deserving. I think it's going to be, this is almost like another 2-horse race with Guillermo del Toro probably having the lead at this point. But you're right. I think those other 5 you mentioned are probably the 5 through 10 in this category, and I would have been happy to see any of them up in this category. Yeah, that's all I can say. I think you're right. I think it's going to be Guillermo del Toro or Christopher Nolan. While I would have liked to see some other names in here, it's hard to say who's actually going to be on top. Brad, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to be interested to see how this one shakes out, because as much as I do love Guillermo del Toro and Shape of Water, I mean, it was a good movie. You know, I think about all of the components that make for for Best Director, right? And certainly getting great performances out is a big part of that. Making sure that movie, has the look and feel, and working with everybody who goes into this. I don't know. My gut says Nolan for Dunkirk over Shape of Water. I just think there was so much with that film, and so much. I know there's a ton of buzz for Shape of Water, but I don't know. Technically speaking, I think Dunkirk brought a little bit more to the table. But I mean, I would be happy with either Nolan or Del Toro taking Oscar away for this category. So, as long as it's one of those two, I'm 100% A-okay. I know a lot of people love Lady Bird. I know Greta Gerwig, she's real big for you. But I just, man, as good as that movie was, I feel like she's just gonna get edged out here, unfortunately.
I see this as a step for her, though, right? This is a big step.
Yeah,
I think we could expect more great things from Greta, right? By the way, great is in her first name. By the way,
it is,
and it's also yeah. I think there's going to be more great things from her, and I just don't know if this is her year. It would be a huge surprise and a shock, and people would be extremely happy. But I think Brad, you probably can't go wrong with Christopher Nolan either. Like I said, I don't know who's going to take it.
I think at best, Greta Gerwig's probably middle of this pack. I think probably Jordan Peele is a little lower down in the category. I think he probably just snuck his way in. Nothing against his direction, but just I think the types of things that people are looking for aren't necessarily present in Get Out. And so that was probably a harder one for a lot of Academy voters to vote for. I mean, I do think this is Guillermo del Toro, but I do think if anyone takes it from him, it will be Nolan. So yeah, I think we're all lining up.
And as it works out, like, if Guillermo del Toro wins, and this could be an argument we have, but I'm not sure that this is his strongest movie. He's got a string of great movies, as does Christopher Nolan. I happen to think Guillermo del Toro's best was Pan's Labyrinth, still,
sure,
no matter how many nominations. And that happens a lot. Like, sometimes a director will put out great movies and get overlooked, and then later on, a movie comes out that gets attention, and that's the one they win for. It happens with actors, happens with directors.
Well, a lot of time, also, you're not competing with your previous body of work. You're competing against the field for the year this was created, right?
Oh.
So well, I mean, those things factor in, but we can't award Guillermo del Toro for Pan's Labyrinth this year, but he did put out Shape of Water, which has been, I think that it's very universally liked. I think there are some of these other films that are, or at least in terms of the direction style, that, I think Dunkirk is popular because there's a lot of big splashy war stuff. But I think there's also a contingent of people who are, a war director making it to the Academy. And I'm not in that category, but I've heard that, just like, oh, another war movie in the Oscars, whatever. I think Lady Bird's direction is probably too understated for some people. Same with Phantom Thread. But I think Shape of Water hits the most buttons for the most people. I think there's some bold moments. There's some tender moments. There's some stylishly interesting moments. I think all of those things are all like things that you would want to check off when you were appealing to the average Academy voter.
Maybe if Dunkirk, had more war and more horses and more fog on a battlefield and war horses, maybe it would, put it up there and edge it out. I don't know. We'll see. Sammy W in the chat says Del Toro will take this one, he thinks. So, Will, he's definitely in line with your thinking here. Steve says he should get an Oscar for that restroom filling up with water with ease. Yeah, and that's one of those things. I know we need to move on. I don't want to spoil folks who haven't seen Shape of Water yet, but it is in the trailer. There's the scene in the bathroom where it's full of water. Would you guys say that's more of a director thing or a cinematography thing?
Both. Like, the thing is that I think on the whole, we as audience members and even the Academy doesn't quite get what directors do. And that's weird to say the Academy Award doesn't get what directors do, but they tend to prioritize flashier effects and things like that, which are often a partnership between the director and the cinematographer. I think the director's real job is, more so than everything, cohesiveness plus getting good performances out of the actors. I think that when I look at directors, that's what I look at here. And that's why I think there is the case for Sean Baker having, having Sean Baker being kind of snubbed out of this category.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. The Oscars are coming up quick. We got a couple more categories. I want to make sure we have enough time to really talk through Best Picture. So we're saving that for last. But next up is Animated Feature. We've got the Boss Baby, The Breadwinner, Coco, Ferdinand, and Loving Vincent. I know for me, I haven't seen The Boss Baby yet. I was surprised to see it show up in this list. I'm not saying I won't see it. I definitely like to see films and form my own opinion. It just, I don't know. It wasn't really one that spoke to me, so I did not see it. I haven't seen The Breadwinner. I'd love to see Coco take this, but I also recognize that Coco is the only one I've seen in this list. So maybe I'm a little biased. I don't know.
This one's going, I mean, again, when we're talking about locks, I think this one is a lock for Coco because of the exact reason that you mentioned. I think people just didn't see some of these other ones. Interesting note, I'm really going to try to see all of the movies before the Oscars. I've got a little plan. I'm going to see everything that's nominated before the Oscars. I think Ferdinand might be the one that falls through the cracks because it's only playing at like 10 a.m. on the weekdays here, but I don't think it's hitting home release until after the Academy Awards. So Ferdinand is going to be the one that got away. I can't speak to it. Loving Vincent is beautiful, but that's about it. The Boss Baby is marginally better than it has any right to be. And it's still a bad movie, but it's slightly better than you'd expect. And I think maybe that's giving people some goodwill. Breadwinner is a great G-Kids film, and there's always one of those in this category. It's really good. And if anything takes this away from Coco, it would be that. But seriously, like, I would put my mortgage against Coco winning. Like, I think it's that firm.
Let's hope your mortgage company isn't listening well.
God, that would be fucking awful if like all of a sudden
and
the
Will
Boss
loses
Baby,
his house
because of the Boss Baby. Like, that would be absolute worst case scenario. No, Coco is going to win. Coco deserves to win.
Yeah, I have to agree. I can only speak to Coco. I haven't seen any of the other 4 movies. I might try to see 1 or 2 more. I actually did want to see Ferdinand because Susie, Felipe, our friend of the show, Felipe's wife, said, "Oh, I want to see that. Looks cute." When we saw trailers for it, I want to see it. And Felipe and Brad both looked at her like, "What? Are you crazy?" And I'm like, "I'll see it with you. I'll go see it with you."
And then you didn't. You let her down.
We haven't. I know. I totally let her down. But my phone's not ringing either. I got next for
Jim, you need to find whatever animated movie came out this year where the moral is about not letting people down, and you need to watch that. And maybe it was Ferdinand. That was the moral. None of us have seen it, so we don't know. Maybe that was the moral of the story. And
aren't they all about that, really? When you come right down to it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Coco, I think, man, it's just, I mean, it's almost become kind of a joke when Pixar has one of their big films in here. Generally, they are super, super hard to beat, and the quality is there, the storytelling quality, the acting, voice acting quality, the animation quality. It's all there. Coco would be a deserving winner for sure.
Steve in the live chat says, "I think you guys can't see Ferdinand because John Cena is in it." See what I did there?
Well played, sir. Well played.
All right. Well, guys, let's go ahead and move on to Best Picture. Just like with the Oscars themselves, we saved this category for last. And the nominees are Call Me By Your Name, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Get Out, Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, The Post, The Shape of Water, and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Is there anything missing from this list before we say anything else?
Jim?
I have 2. I think I think Logan could have made this list. Would have been nice to see, and not that there's quotas like, oh, you got to have a superhero movie in here. But I thought Logan really was defied expectations for a superhero movie. tremendously written and you know, a great story told. Much out of the regular cookie cutter mold of most superhero movies. I thought that should have been in here. And of course, we mentioned Florida Project. To me, this is my biggest snub, not being in this category. I think I've seen every movie in this category except for Phantom Thread and Darkest Hour. But man, I just movies like, and it wasn't really I like The Post. And I know Spielberg directed it, and everybody says, oh, it's an important movie for our time, which is great, but I just don't see what leapt off the screen for me to make it Best Picture. If I had to make room, that's the slot that I would make room in. Not seeing Darkest Hour or Phantom Thread, but yeah.
So I would say that I agree with you that like the Florida Project should be here. I don't even think you have to cut anything for it because
make it 10.
They have this rule where they can go up to 10 and they don't often go up to 10. And I feel like that is such a missed opportunity because even if you put Florida Project or Logan or The Big Sick or Wonder Woman, something here, something that has less of a chance of winning, it's still a thing that they can put on their next releases of their, from Academy Award nominee, like, and that's really good for a film. And I think that not going to all 10 is robbing a film of that opportunity, of that marquee, of that title. I would definitely put Florida Project in here. I would put it here in place. I think The Post is a perfectly fine film. It's one of the weaker ones of the category, but I think it's fine enough where it's at. I would put it here in place of Darkest Hour. Darkest Hour actually had weak direction and a pretty weak script. It had amazing lead performance, a decent supporting performance, and in fact all the performances were good, and it had some really great production design and some really great costuming. And so I get why it would be in some of the categories it's here for lead actor and for makeup. I think those are great places for it, but I don't think the sum of its parts really should put it here in Best Picture. So if I were redoing this list, and if I were also scrubbing out a few of my personal choices like a Ghost Story or what have you, I would take out Darkest Hour and I would add Florida Project, and I would probably add something like The Big Sick, and that would be my my round out 10 list.
Jim, it's interesting that you mentioned Logan when we were kind of talking through our favorite films of the year on a previous episode. Logan kept coming up, and I was asking myself, like, man, like, should that be in contention for Best Picture this year? And the more I thought about it, the more I was just like, it had so much going for it. It should be. And looking in the chat, Ben says, I would add Logan to that list. And it's good to see that we're kind of not alone in that thinking. Yes, it's a superhero movie. Yes, Hollywood, I think, is not a super huge fan of giving these big awards to superhero movies. But you know what? Superhero movies are upping their game year after year. DC aside for the most part, these movies are getting better and better. So who knows? Maybe we'll eventually see one crack this list. But man, guys, if like a black and white amazing movie like Logan didn't break into this list, I don't even know. Ben also said he's glad to see Get Out on this list as well. Me too. I don't think it's going to win, unfortunately. But Jim, you mentioned earlier, sort of like for Greta Gerwig, and Lady Bird, it being a step. I think same thing here with Jordan Peele and this film. It deserves to get this recognition, even if it doesn't win. I think that there's a lot of oomph in being able to say from, Academy Award nominees. So glad to see that here too.
One thing that's nice, at least, if I am saying, kind of looking on the bright side of the Logan snub, is we did see that it was nominated in the adapted screenplay category. And what's cool about that is when you do see a superhero film make it to the Oscars, it's usually in one of the technical fields. You might see it for visual effects, maybe in costume design. You might even see the worst movie of the year win an Oscar for makeup and hair, as happened last year. These are all things that can happen with superhero movies, but here we've got a superhero movie that was nominated for its writing and not for its like visual effects. And so even if it's not in that best picture category, which I agree, I think that it has a strong case to be there. I do think that it's a step in the right direction to see it recognized in the script category.
Agreed.
You know, I do have a question about Logan. Just thinking back to what I said. So I went back and watched the black and white version of Logan, which I think just makes that movie tremendously better. But of course, that movie did not come out initially in black and white. Which version of that movie do you think like is submitted when it comes to consideration?
I'm guessing it would be the original version. But I do think that there's a case to be made for noir because it probably hits a lot of the buttons because it has to play for at least a week in theaters, and they did that with noir. Like they did give it a little like kind of after the fact theatrical run. The fact that I don't remember the exact timing, but I think the fact that those screenings happened around the same time the Blu-ray was becoming available might technically disqualify it because I think there's something about it being available for home release before theatrical. But I don't know. I love both versions of it, so I'm not hating either direction.
All right. Well, guys, any other categories that we want to touch on before we wrap up this discussion?
I mean, just in terms of like things that we might have liked to see in here. I mean, we mentioned, James Franco. We mentioned the Florida Project that we wanted to see in here. Michael what's his name? Stolberg.
Yeah.
Sorry. Wonder Woman. One of the things that I kind of wanted to see on here was just like you mentioned from Personal Shopper.
Stewart?
Kristen Stewart. Another Twilight actor that I would have liked to see get attention was Robert Pattinson for his performance in Good Time. For those of you who haven't seen Good Time, it's a very raw movie. It's pretty action packed. It's tense. But he's transformed in this movie. You don't even recognize that it's him. And it's not just makeup. I mean, it's just the way he acts. He's totally out of what you'd expect a Robert Pattinson character to be. I like that performance. I would have liked to see him get some. But other than that, I think we're generally satisfied. We have to be. They're not going to change. I think all we can do is kind of give love to the movies that we love on this show and in our social media, and hope for the best. And we've talked about the nomination categories this year, who we want to see win, who we think will win. It's going to be a fun day in March. Is it March?
March.
Yeah,
beginning of March.
A month and change. The one thing that I found really interesting this year is I'm going to make I don't know if this is a bold statement or not, but I think we need to fix the sound categories. So historically, you've got both sound editing and sound mixing, and technically they're supposed to be two separate things. Sound mixing, think of that sort of like soundscape, all of the elements that are kind of incorporated in with the sound, whereas the sound effects or sound editing is more of like your straight up like sound effects, like your big bangs and your big explosions and stuff like that. And so you could sort of draw like a bit of a line in the sand between the two. They're different. I mean, there's different sound artists doing each one. This year, though, the 5 nominees for sound editing, Baby Driver, Blade Runner 2049, Dunkirk, Shape of Water, and Star Wars The Last Jedi, are the exact same 5 nominees for sound mixing, which makes me believe that the people that are voting don't know the difference and are conflating the two. So while there is technically a difference between the two, I think that the difference is not being reflected in the voting. And because of that, I almost think we should just switch to a unified sound design award where, and again, like you'd have to have two people come up, both the editor and the mixer. But whatever, they can both get a statue, right? That would save some time in the awards. Cut it down. I'm done with both sound editing and sound mixing.
You get a statue, and you get a statue, and you get a statue.
Well, yeah, Will, if they combine them into one category for sound design, I really do like that idea. I don't know if they'll ever do it. They could make room for a category like that we've complained about for years, which is best like motion capture performance or best
virtual performance, because
best virtual
voice acting as well.
Voice acting and yeah, that would be a great category to add. And yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see that, but
we should. If you think about all of the better performances of the year, of any given year, you could make a case that Andy Serkis is one of the top 10 or 20 performances of any given year that he puts out a movie for. But because he has some CGI over him, which in some cases is as much CGI covering him as some of the actors get in their makeup and prosthetics, he just doesn't get the opportunity to be nominated for anything. I think that's a bit of a shame. I think Andy Serkis is one of the best actors we have working these days. And I get the hesitation to put him in one of the main categories, but I do think a category that he could consistently take home the statues that he deserves really is long overdue.
Guys, it's okay because Andy Serkis is going to get a Lifetime Achievement Award at some point. So it'll balance out.
That's true. I mean, I
hopefully not posthumously. You know what I mean?
Like, wow. Jim.
Wow.
They can't wait too long.
Well, I mean, they can't wait too long, but at the same time, it's not like he's like on his deathbed or anything.
Right.
No, but yeah. I would like to see that other category added. No. That would be great.
Indeed. Well, guys, let's look to wrap things up with some quick plugs. This is the part of the show where we let you, our wonderful listeners, know some things that we think you should check out, movies maybe you should see. You may have missed this one if you didn't see it in its theatrical run, but the new adaptation of Stephen King's It is now available on Blu-ray, DVD, and streaming. I know a lot of folks who were kind of on the fence about it. They did not go to see it in theaters. They're like, I'll wait for rental. I saw the miniseries. Well, now is your time. And this has been out for a couple of weeks, and people don't really know that it's out for some reason. I don't know if it's not getting marketing or what's going on there. But the Movie Bears Podcast is officially letting you know that it is available. So go check it out. And then go back and listen to our review and chime in with your thoughts on Facebook or YouTube, if that's how you access the show. We'd love to know how you guys feel about it. Moving on down the line, Jim, what have you got this week?
I caught up with a movie I think I rented it on iTunes called Marjorie Prime. This was a movie that was released this year. I don't think it was in theaters, though. I think it might have went right to VOD. And watching this movie, I was struck at how much it seemed like the long lost missing Black Mirror episode. This movie played so much like a Black Mirror episode. This one stars John Hamm, Gina Davis, who we haven't seen in something in a long time, and Lois Smith, who was fantastic in this movie. This movie is about it's set in the near future when someone dies, a loved one dies. A holographic recreation of that person can be created and programmed with memories of what that person was like, and you can interact with them and kind of relive some of those moments in life. And it was kind of a bittersweet movie. There's nothing super shocking in this thing. I just thought it was really well done. I thought some of the acting was really great. Not sure what it was exactly trying to say, and maybe that's it didn't have a huge impact, but it was a really great, like I said, if you like Black Mirror and you like kind of that, how science and life kind of intersect, I think this is a really fun movie. It's called Marjorie Prime.
Jim, you actually said the name of that movie incorrectly. I'm sorry. I don't often correct people on things because that's douchey, but you said it wrong.
What did I
It's
say?
it's
Marjorie Prime. No, it's not.
I am Marjorie Prime.
She is not a sword wielding robot. No,
But she
Hey.
could be.
she could be Marjorie Prime too.
Wait. So she's not a sword wielding robot?
No, you're
Jim,
out.
in the trailers, do they show her? Do they ever prove to us in the trailers that she's not a sword wielding robot?
No.
So you just spoiled this movie for me.
Yeah, I guess I backed into a spoiler there.
Hey, some interesting trivia here. I was talking to Sammy W earlier about Marjorie Prime, and I was mentioning to him how much I liked it. And apparently his friend's dog was in the movie, Jim. There's one point in the movie where there's a full-grown dog, and it is his friend's dog. She lives in Denver. So I think that's pretty awesome. You know, I wish I'd known it.
This movie, yeah. Brad, you just spoiled the movie too. Now people know there's a dog in it. Congratulations. Congratulations.
And this film did not play at Fantastic Fest, so I know the dog is probably okay. So spoils on spoils.
Well, I cannot either confirm or deny that, actually.
Yeah.
You just have to watch.
We won't say anymore, but apparently
all dogs go to heaven eventually. Sorry. That's what happens.
that is a dog's purpose. So
yes.
Spoilers for so many movies.
Well,
guys?
What have you got this week? Well,
so I would like to plug. Yeah, I've got two middling choices, so I'm figuring out which one is best. So I'm catching up on all of the Oscar films just because there were a few that slipped through the cracks for me, and so I'm in kind of scramble mode. And so I checked out the last of the documentaries that I hadn't seen, which was Abacus, Small Enough to Jail. So this movie is on Netflix. It's also on Amazon Prime, so you can find it pretty easily.
Amazon
Prime, where Marjorie lives. And so it's the documentary about, of course, we know about the 2008 financial crisis and just everything that happened with all of the different banks during that time. There was only one U.S. bank that faced any criminal charges in the wake of all of that. And it was this really small bank called Abacus Federal Savings of Chinatown in New York that was owned by a Chinese immigrant family and kind of served a predominantly the Chinatown population. And so this film follows this family as they go through their trial, and you learn a little bit about their community and what they got. And it really raises a lot of interesting questions about, like, why was it that of all of the different banks that did all of the different things, why was this one the one that got in trouble? And the subtitle of the film, Small Enough to Jail, kind of the play off of the big enough, too big to fail thing, speaks a little bit to that. It's actually pretty fascinating. It is a documentary about finances and people on trial. So it's not the most engaging stuff. But the subjects themselves are pretty interesting, and it's weird. I went into this documentary and was not expecting to root for the defense attorney who was defending the banks during the financial crisis. And this film does kind of make you do that in some ways. So Abacus, Small Enough to Jail. It's not a home run, but I think if the subject matter interests you, this is a well-made doc.
Well, just give us your pick for best documentary. Just give us which one it is.
I would say Faces Places is going to win. Strong Island would be my personal pick. No, I take that back. Faces Places, just Faces Places for both.
Great pick. It's probably the only one in that category that I saw, so that's good.
There you go. All right, well, guys, we're going to go ahead and tie this show up with a pretty bow and send it out into the universe. Jim, after you do some editing, everyone will be able to access it through iTunes, Stitcher, and our website. But if you are listening through the magic of digital tape delay, even as we speak, be it 2 days from now, 2 months from now, 2 years from now, 2 decades from now, don't forget, you can always go to YouTube, look up Movie Bears Podcast. You can see the video version of this show. If you're just listening by audio, that may be handy for your commute, but you're missing some of the fun. In any event, guys, in case anyone would like to continue the conversation, let's give them some info on how they can touch base with us in between shows. Jim, where can people find you online?
I am on Twitter at JJP Out West, all one word, JJP Out West. I'm also on Facebook, Jim Puliafco, my real name.
All right. There we go. Will, how about you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Whatever Cove. I post there sometimes. I'm on Facebook. I'm William Lindis. Send me a message first. Make sure it's me. I post there way too much. Look for me on Letterboxd. It's where I talk about films when I'm not talking about them here. Just look for me as William Lindis. And also look for me in Orlando next week, where I will be there for a full week at a work convention. Haha, just kidding. Don't look for me. I will be busy at work.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter at iBradPro. Find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. And, send me a message first as well. I get contacted by a lot of spam bots, so I want to make sure you're not one of them. Also, if anybody is going to be down in Puerto Vallarta for Beef Dip, which is already happening, we're headed there just in a couple days. We're leaving on Wednesday. If you want to hang out, talk movies on the beach or at the club, whatever, grab a coffee, grab a drink, let us know. We'd love to chat with you guys while we're down there. We will see you all next time. We're going to be recording on a different day next week. I think we said Tuesday, or was it Wednesday? Wednesday. That's right. So Wednesday of next week. And of course, that date is going to be Wednesday, February the 7th.
7th, yeah.
7th. Yeah, It's the 7th. We'll be recording. So don't tune in on Monday because we won't be here. We'll still all be traveling, but we'll see you guys next Wednesday. As always, thank you to everyone who was hanging out with us in the live chat. Both of our Bens, Steve, Sammy, Bobby Miller, everybody who was hanging out with us. It was great to hear from you guys. And for those of you listening on iTunes, Stitcher, etc., we love you guys as well. Thanks for all of your support over the years. 269 episodes.
Nice.
You guys. Whew,
nice.
Boy. Good stuff. We love you all. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.